There's no need to like put on a corporate hat or anything like that. Just kind of, just be Nancy with this and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
no, that's fine. And quite honestly, after checking through barrels today, I feel a lot more relaxed.
I think that'll do it. Hey everyone, welcome to the newly rebranded Bourbon Pursuit. Over this past weekend, we went live with a brand new logo that's much cleaner, much slicker, and really embodies the next generation of our logo. We're really proud of it, and we'll talk about it here in a minute when we get to Patreon. Now, when we also talk about Patreon, for anybody who actually ordered bottles from the Bourbon Community Roundtable Buffalo Trace Barrel Pick, those shipments are starting to go out and will continue to go out for the next 2 weeks. We are also on our 2 to 3 week recording spree. This means that if you're a Patreon supporter, you have access to the calendar of our recordings, of who we're going to be recording, as well as the ability to join live and be able to talk about it and ask questions along with us. So it's another perk for those Patreon members who want to join this and actually be a part of these live recordings. As we had mentioned before with the Bourbon Community Roundtable, if you were paying attention on Facebook this past week, as well as I put on Instagram and Twitter, is that the barrel itself is going to have a new life. We are now partnering with Third Turn Brewing out in J-Town in Louisville, Kentucky, to actually do a Bourbon Pursuit and Third Turn Brewing collaboration Imperial Stout barrel aged beer. So we're going to start working on the mash bill or the grain bill, and it's going to take a deep sleep for a few months, probably closer to 6, maybe longer, who knows? And we're going to see some bottles roll out here, I don't know, maybe in the fall. We'll see what happens. Remember that the Kentucky Derby Museum's Legend Series is taking place tonight. So if you're listening to this today on the release day and you live in Louisville, make sure you go to derbymuseum.org Legend Series and you go and buy tickets for the interview with Fred Minnick with Fred and Freddie No of Jim Beam. The next one we have on deck is with Evan Colesveen of Willett Distillery. So if you haven't had a chance to go and be there for a Derby Museum Legend Series recording or being there in person, you really should be. So go to the website, buy it, and we'll be there. You can meet us, you can meet Fred, and meet all these great people inside of the bourbon community. Now for our show today, if you've never heard of Nancy Fraley before, you've been really missing out. She's known as the nose in the industry, for crying out loud. She's responsible for blending most of the popular major names in the market, and you can find her talking about them on straightbourbon.com. However, in this episode, we're going to be focusing more on Joseph A. Magnus and her role there, as well as the history of Joseph A. Magnus as well. It's all quite fascinating. Make sure you are following us on all those great social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Bourbon Pursuit. Also sponsor us at patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. And now we have new stuff that are available on Patreon. As you can see, if you're watching the video podcast, we have new bottle totes available. We also have patches that are going to be rolling out, as well as a brand new t-shirt design. So make sure you go to patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit and help support this show. Subscribe to us on iTunes, YouTube, and Facebook so you can get all the podcasts coming to you from all angles. And make sure you also subscribe to our email list. So go to bourbonpursuit.com, scroll down a little bit until you see a newsletter sign up. Do that. You're going to have every new episode that we come out with beamed straight to your inbox. Thanks for listening and enjoy this week's episode.
Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order. From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixir's Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com. Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof. And the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long.
Play Whiskey Wednesday Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you can win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select 2 doors at checkout, and if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast, the official podcast of bourbon, the number one podcast of bourbon. This is going to be a fun episode because I think it's taken close to, I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe a year to actually get our guest on today. We were been exchanging emails for a long time. She has actually helped one of the barrel picking groups I'm in take care of one of the single barrels at the distillery that we'll be talking about today. But she also has her own company. She is a master blender, an international consultant. And this is actually the second master blender that we've had on the show before. Back on episode 103, we featured Drew Mayville, who's the master blender at Buffalo Trace. And if you didn't get a chance to listen to that, you really should, because really it's an impossible decision to wonder, who's the real star of the show here? Is it the master distiller or the master blender? And I think we're going to get a lot of information out of Nancy today and some of the things that she really brings to the table that a distiller necessarily just can't do. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our guest. So today we have Nancy the Nose Fraley. And Nancy is as I mentioned, a master blender, an international consultant with a nosing services. I don't want to say LLC or enterprise or corporated, but you know what? Nancy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's good to be here finally.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, like I said, it was funny because you say international consultant, like you really are. You are international. You're all over the place.
Yes, I have clients from Australia, Belize, Haiti, Canada, Mexico. I'm bumping between every state in the union, flying from coast to coast every week.
Yeah, I was about to say, because you must be like diamond on Delta, wrapped 3 times plus platinum, plus like American elite status, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
There are some perks of being in the first class, though, So I guess when you are flying first class, what kind of spirit are you drinking if you're flying first class?
Often depends on where I'm going. I have to say most of the time I'll drink bourbon, but being a brandy lover at heart, and if I'm flying internationally, say from here to Europe and back, I might drink Armagnac or cognac or.
Oh, cool. We'll talk about those a little bit later. Yeah, it's always funny because in my last job, I used to travel a lot, and I think it almost gets to the point where like. Maybe you experience this first, being a traveler, like all of a sudden you get bumped up to first class and you're like, oh yeah, like let's do this, like bigger seats and all the free booze and champagne. And it's awesome for like the first like 5 times. But then after that, you're like, I just want a water and a pillow. Like, is that okay? So
exactly. That's Yeah. After a while, I'm not that I mind first or business, but after a while, not that it ever really gets sold out, but I think it's the amount of travel that it gets a little tiring.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. So
I
let's.
love the work.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. So I do want to kind of talk about, just about you for a bit. And I want to talk about, do you remember like your first experience with like whiskey or bourbon and like what maybe like got you on this train and stuff like that?
Yes, I very much remember that. My very first experience, I was maybe 7 years old at my father's wedding to my stepmother, and I had inadvertently put down a glass of Coca-Cola. And my father was introducing my sister and I to his law partners, and I came back later to pick up what I thought was my Coca-Cola, and lo and behold, it was Coke and bourbon. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. And I told his sister, my aunt, what I was drinking, and she said, oh, no, honey, that's right where you left your Coca-Cola. So it was my first permissioned imbibe.
What age was this again?
Oh, I guess that I was about 6 or 7 years old.
Oh, okay. So you had a pretty early introduction to it then, we could say.
I did, yeah. And it wasn't really professionally when my interest really sparked until I was at a fundraiser in Oakland, California. And I'm actually trained academically as an attorney. But before that, I got a master's in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. So I have a very, very, very different academic background. But I was at a fundraiser, and they had some craft spirits. And I tasted this brandy called Germain Robin brandy. And it was literally life-changing. I just couldn't believe how phenomenal it was. I was already a spirits connoisseur. Lo and behold, I quit my job at a law firm I was working at, traveled through Morocco, Spain, Mexico, trying to find myself. And a year later, I ended up working at Germain Robin, and they were one of the two first craft distilleries to start in the United States, in California, in 1982. Started by an 11th generation cognac maker, Hubert Germain Robin, who he had left by the time I got there, but after I left Germain Robin, he became my mentor and good friend, and I've gained a lot of my blending techniques from him, and so that's kind of how I got into all this craziness and such, was through having a brandy background.
Well, you also said you were doing law too. Did you have a law background as well then?
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't actually practice law, but yes, I trained as maritime and admiralty law attorney, and before that, I got my master's from Harvard University, and
just this little no-name school called Harvard. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's heard of it before. But I was on my way to, I wanted to go on for my PhD in that field. And I love academia, but it just, and law, I enjoyed that, but it just wasn't quite the right thing. And I think when I found my talent for nosing and blending, that that changed everything in my life, and I've never looked back. It's infinitely more interesting than practicing law.
I was about to say. I mean, and did you actually pass the bar in California, or
I didn't?
Okay,
I came very close, and I just didn't really have the passion for it. It's that's part of my. I guess the family business, as it were, and it just didn't, I enjoyed law school, but the actual practice didn't interest me in the least.
Well, it's good you didn't pass the bar then. It wouldn't have taken you down this path then, right?
Absolutely not. I would have been, a miserable, a miserly person.
All right, so we have to talk about your nickname because it's I don't know, maybe some people find it attractive, but you're Nancy the Nose, right? So I guess who gave you this nickname and like how did that stem from?
The first time I ever heard anyone give that to me was from Bill Owens, the president of the American Distilling Institute. And so I'm also the director of research, and I teach sensory analysis and blending classes for the American Distilling Institute. But years ago, he noticed that I had seemed to be really good at what I do and started calling me the Nose. And I thought, oh, gee, though, that sounds rather offensive. but now I take it as a compliment.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's like you're almost like a bloodhound in human form then, right?
Yeah, I think also Richard Patterson, blender in the UK, has that name too. I think he's the original, the Nose. But I here on this side of the Atlantic, I think I hear people call me that all the time.
It almost sounds like you'd be a character in like a Dick Tracy, like something like that, right?
Exactly.
So, I read a few different things online, and somebody had mentioned like, when did you realize that you had a good like olfactory sense and stuff like this, and kind of like tell our audience like, where did you really start getting your quote unquote superpowers here?
Well, again, I mentioned that I had my first taste of bourbon when I was quite young, and through the years, I would go to wine tastings, and I enjoy wine. I'm not really a wine person the way I am with spirits, but it just seemed really obvious to me, notes that were there that other people couldn't get. And I guess I have, for want of a better term, like a photographic memory when it comes to aroma. There are meals like I had in February 1977, for example. I remember exactly where I was, what the weather was, what I ate, what I was actually thinking during the meal. There are certain times in my life when I've had intense aromatic experiences, I guess you could say, and I remember everything that's going on at that moment, or at that time with that memory. So it was kind of an ongoing thing. I knew it was always there. I never thought about doing anything professionally with it for sure. And it wasn't really until I worked at Bourbon that I realized, wow, what I really want to do is be a master blender. I get giddy when I work around barrels and then, in shays and warehouses and being around that. So it just, when I kind of stumbled into this world, it just, the two things kind of meshed, and that was it. I knew what I wanted to do.
Talk about one of those. Give me an example of what you said was like one of those experiences that you just, you just said like your senses just overtook and you kind of had like this aura of a moment and stuff like that. Like give me an example of like what that is. Cause I don't know if I can even think about that. Like I can barely remember when my first daughter was born, and I almost want to erase that memory. Right. So it's like,
right. Well, one would be that experience literally that did happen in February of 1977 when I had my first Mexican food, and I remember the aromas. I had a beef taco and cheese enchilada, and I remember the flavors of the salsa. It was raining that day. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. I also remember being in Fez in Morocco, and in that would have been December 2006, and walking through the souks, and smelling the aroma of spices in 1 second, and the very next moment you walk right next to a goat head, and it's festering with flies all around it, and you can smell rotting meat and whatnot. So I feel like those were.
I wouldn't tell if that's like a good experience. That's a memorable one though.
Listen, and the thing about having this is a good deal of the time it's not really pleasant, and so that's why I'm a good deal of what I do too. I'm able to pick faults out of distillates very easily. Sulfur, acetaldehyde, acetic acid, all these things going on, and I seem to be able to pick out all the bad things. It's not all about the pleasant aroma.
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about that too, because first talk about like the kind of services that you do offer to a lot of your clients out there, right? Because I think it's truly unique in what you do offer.
Sure. So what I do most of the time, the majority of my practice is actually working as a blender for Joseph Magnus being one of the major distilleries I work for, but I'm what I guess you could call a freelance blender. Wyoming whiskey, I help them with their blending. Iron Root Republic, and Denison, Texas. J. Henry and Sons, and Wisconsin. So I get the blends together, pick out the single barrels, that sort of thing. For clients like that I work for year after year after year. I also help distilleries that are starting up to make sure they have the right aroma profiles. I help to develop maturation programs. Make sure that the warehousing conditions are correct, and anything that involves maturation and blending, pretty much. I also help people who might have some kind of issue with their distillate, say some kind of faulty fermentation, for instance. I'll help identify and remedy problems with the production process. But it's mostly on the blending side of things.
Interesting. So I'll just take one kind of idea or question from like the because we're gonna have a lot of talk about blending, right? So I kind of want to get an idea of the others. Yeah. So, but I mean, on that side, like, when you are looking at like a distillery that's starting, maybe they're creating new make, or they're doing something where they need your services beforehand. Like, what are some of those common mistakes that you see distillers make? Or, is there like, can you notice it like during the white dog or the early mash process, and you're just like, you can just smell it out, and you can just like, there's a problem here.
Oh yeah. Well, oftentimes if people, whether they hire me or another consultant, one thing that you'll find quite often is maybe but before we even get to your question there, is they'll buy the wrong piece of equipment for what they're trying to make. They're by that I mean the wrong choice of still. They're that kind of depends on what you're trying to produce, so that can be an issue right there. Probably
give an example. Like, what do you mean the wrong kind of still? Because I mean, what we all talk about in here is we talk about pot and we talk about column, right? And those are the biggest things in here. So like, what do you mean? Like, what's an example of something?
Sometimes one still fits all. So if you're making a bourbon, for example, and you buy a German still, steam jacket and such, that may not necessarily be appropriate for bourbon production. depends on what you're trying to make, and what your goals are, what contour level of the spirit you're trying to produce. So that can be an issue. But once you're already in production, probably the primary problem I find are people having issues with fermentation, and oftentimes it'll just come down to improper sanitization or cleanliness in the fermentation tanks. So that's a really common issue I find, because of course here in the United States, and unless you say grew up in bourbon country and apprenticed at a distillery with your father or whatnot, we don't really have people coming into the craft world usually don't have experience in distillation. So unless you've taken classes or hired a consultant or had some kind of training, I find people that are doing, say, pot still distillation are not making proper cuts. Go
ahead and explain what a cut is to a lot of us that are kind of like, what the hell did she just say? Yeah.
So during pot still distillation, of course, the whole distillation process, you're going from liquid to vapor form back to liquid again. You're trying to. So when you're making cuts, the first cuts off your if you're doing pot still distillation will usually be a double distillation, and so say you might go from 8 to 10 degrees of alcohol, with your fermented product. Let's say we're making a bourbon. And from there, if maybe 27 to 30% alcohol, and then finally say to maybe 70% alcohol by volume, if you're doing that style of distillation. So when you're making your cuts, what you're trying to do, and this really occurs the place where it really counts is during your the second distillation. The first fractions that you have coming off the still will be what they call heads, okay? And those are the lower boiling point alcohols, and you might find acetaldehyde, acetone, methanol, ethyl acetate coming off there, and from there you go into the hearts, and that's the majority of what you're trying to capture, and ethyl alcohol essentially. After that, you go into what are known as the tails, or the fusel oils. So that's oilier, higher boiling point alcohols, higher molecular alcohols. So you want to capture just a little bit of that for long-term maturation. Again, it depends on how much of that you capture. Will depend on how long you want to age the spirit. So there's a lot of science, but a lot of art to it too. So that's what I mean by that.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of us that have taken tours and been around this for a little bit, you kind of know what the hearts and the heads and the tails and those kind of. I don't think I've ever heard anybody call it cuts before, so I think that I was like, what? Yeah, so cuts. I know we're like 120 something episodes and nobody's ever said cuts before, so.
Amazing.
Go figure, right?
First time for everything, right?
I know. So, before I dive into more of the blending, there's a few different things that I kind of want to ask too, because, you also don't do just, you talked about Armagnac already, you talked about brandy. So, I mean, you consult in a bunch of different kinds of spirits, right?
Yes. I mostly whiskey followed by rum would be, but I would have to say, at least here in the States, because that's what people, that's what people drink. The majority of what I do is whiskey.
And when you're judging these different kinds of spirits, or you're trying to figure out like, oh, like how do I figure out the problem, or how do I, go about solving an issue? Like, is there a different playbook for every single one, or is there just a predefined methodology that you said like, oh, you just follow this ABC for everything, every single thing in here?
Well, it's funny you mentioned this. I actually teach a course at a distilled spirits epicenter, Moonshine University, on advanced sensory analysis. Where we and I do this at ADI too, where I go. I actually do have a method for it, and I've been working on a book for the past few years. Shameless self-promotion.
We know how long books can take, so don't worry.
But it's actually with the copy editor at the moment, and it should be out soon to talking about this. But what I do is I look at issues from the very beginning of production, starting with raw ingredients, any kind of fermentable substrate that you're working with, water, yeast, those kind of issues, and going from issues and mashing to fermentation, all the various things that can happen at that stage, on to distillation, maturation issues, issues with barrels, issues that might have to do with the improper conditions in your warehouse, for example, too much humidity, too little humidity, that kind of thing. I look at packaging issues, bottling, post-production issues. So all that to say is the methodology is to look at all the various places that there could be an issue. For instance, if you find sulfur in a distillate, we'll say in a whiskey, and let's say that whiskey was finished in sherry cask. Well, there could be a number of places where in the production process where the sulfur issue could arise. So that's the kind of thing I break down with clients, and figuring out where did it come from the sherry cask? What was it? Something that happened during fermentation. Weak yeast. It could be a number of things. So we dissect all those issues until
awesome.
We nail it down, find out what the problem is, and correct it.
It sounds like there's a problem solving, I guess you could say, challenge to all this, right? So I think that's what you have to figure out. But there's a question that just came in from Terry Bone in the chat, and this kind of just goes back to nosing in general. First is is there any kind of way that you would be able to that you would suggest to listeners on how they can train their noses better? And Terry asked, he says he's heard a trick about rubbing whiskey on the back of your hand to be able to draw out some of the scents. Is there any truth to this method, or any other tricks if you try struggling to develop your nosing?
Well, one thing if we're going to do it in earnest, it depends.
Don't lie to my listeners, okay?
Yeah, okay. So it depends on what you're trying to train for. If you're trying to train as a connoisseur, versus if you're trying to train as a professional, if that makes sense. So if you're training as a connoisseur, I would say there is certainly overlap there too. But
let's think of the lay person, right? Nobody that's going to be going in the industry, but who's the lay person that just wants to be better at it? We'll take that.
I would say a really good way to start bringing that aspect, aroma into consciousness is to start becoming aware of it through the day. When you wake up, think about what you're smelling. Is it coffee? Or are you smelling, mowed grass? Or are you, start thinking about things that throughout your day And, I mean, not that, you have to be conscious of it 24/7, but, to start being aware of what's around you. One thing I've realized too, I created a craft whiskey aroma wheel back in, I don't know, I think
it was 2009. It's been a while, right?
Yeah. I started in 2009 and released it in 2012. But one thing I learned is that I studied aroma wheels from everything, from cork to cheese, to whiskey, wine, coffee, whatever, tea. And if you look at all these things, you can kind of break aroma down into some really basic constituents. And this is a way that I like to get connoisseurs to start thinking about things they're picking up. You can break it down into fruit notes, floral, vegetal / herbal, sweet, spice, smoke. And then for spirits that have aged for a while, I always like to think of wood, meaning tannins and such. And the one I left out too would be nutty / oily. So you can often get, say in an old malt whiskey, for example, a lot of nutty notes, or an old cognac.
You need to think of an acronym for that, so it's just a lot easier for you to remember, right?
Well, yeah. In the brandy world, we kind of call that an elusive aroma rancio. It's RANCIO. As in rancid. Kind of comes from the oxidized esters of fatty acids.
Well, awesome. It was
cheesy, nutty kind of aroma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, you said that you should really wake up in the morning and start feeling, understanding what you're smelling to be able to start, understanding that. And I have a feeling I'm going to fail with that automatically, because every single morning, all I'm going to do is smell dog, because my dog sleeps like 3 inches away from my face. Like I wake up and his face is like right next to my face. I don't know how it works, but.
Yeah, my dog Brandy does that too. She's always just right there.
Right there. I know how it is.
Dog breath.
So let's dive into some of the blending a little bit, right? So
Sure.
You definitely help a lot of distilleries look how to perfect their products. I want you to just kind of talk about your process of going into blending, right? Because Ryan was going to ask a question, like, how do you determine the amount of each different kind of whiskey that goes into a blend, and does that translate when you're mixing small amounts in the lab and then having to find the same percentages in a batch from different barrels and different warehouses? Like kind of like go like explain to us like some of the process.
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point of sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon. If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription.
I want you to just kind of talk about your process of going into blending, right? Because, Ryan was going to ask a question, like how do you determine the amount of each different kind of whiskey that goes into a blend? And does that translate when you're mixing small amounts in the lab and then having to find the same percentages in a batch from different barrels and different warehouses? Explain to us like some of the process.
Well, what I do, I like to think of it, and I know blenders around the world, whether it's for cognac or perfume or tea or whatever, will think of blending often in what I call it the pyramid theory. I've heard people describe it based, in various ways. So you can think about it as the base of a pyramid will be let's say I'm putting together a whiskey, okay? So the base of the pyramid, which would be the majority of the blend, will make up, let's say it has, caramel and vanilla notes, but it's kind of unidimensional outside of that. So what I'm doing on the next tier is starting to fill in levels. And I remember, Drew, that wonderful interview that you did with him a while back from Buffalo Trace, what was talking about this is like building a symphony, or you're trying to build something. So that's what I do at each tier of the pyramid. The second layer, maybe if at the bottom I have plenty of caramel and vanilla, maybe I need a little bit more fat, or body or mouthfeel, or floral or fruit notes, or something like that. So I'll find whiskeys that would be in that profile. And at the very top, I'm looking for a nuance component that might only be as little as 0.5 of a blend to maybe 3 or 4% at most. So when I'm blending, and it doesn't matter if it's 3 barrels or 40 or more, that's in general what I'm trying to think of. So I'm trying to construct something and build dimension to a blend. But as a blender, I always think of the job of a blender is to create complexity, consistency, and quality. Well, how do you create that consistency? Well, I always like to, whenever possible, maybe hold back, 10 to 20, 25% of a blend, and use that in the next one to create that consistency. That it also helps, as your barrels marry in a blend. The barrels from the previous blend will kind of help teach the next one to take on more mature qualities and more balance and harmony and finesse from blend to blend. So I like to being able to create consistency is important too, and that. But you as a blender, I always think our job really is to create complexity and interest and passion.
It sounds like you're doing almost like a sour mash of blending, right? Like having a little bit of the end and going into the next one, right?
Yeah. It is kind of like that, or a little bit maybe like a Solera, if you will. Maybe not a true Solera, fractional blend, but it certainly kind of is a little bit like that in the sense. You want to create that kind of consistency, and I find blending, whereas distillation really is much more of a science, that this is more art, and there certainly is science involved. But at the end of the day, there's no just a formula to a blend. You might have a basic thing that you kind of work with. But the art of it really comes to being able to, fill in the details to the blend, as it were. And
so I'm gonna give Drew the benefit of the doubt that he has the analytics, the history, the everything that they know. They know what warehouses can go in each kind of blend. And they kind of have it almost down, maybe to a formula, right? And I'm going to say that you don't necessarily have that available to you because, when you go to these smaller distilleries, even Joseph Magnus, for example, and they've got a couple hundred barrels. How do you determine like which ones are going to the blend? Because you can go on any tour on the trail, and they're going to be like, it doesn't matter. Like every barrel is going to be different. Like the tastes are going to be, minutely different to each single one. So like, how are you determining when you don't have thousands of barrels to select from about which ones and how you create this consistency?
Well, it depends on, I taste through everything. I would never not taste a barrel. I usually know the stocks quite intimately because I'm tasting through them a lot throughout the year, knowing what's out there. Often, too, it will depend on where things are aging in the warehouse. So, top floors or top tiers will have, the higher or the alcohol content will usually be higher. It'll be more intense, a little spicier. Maybe not as round on the palate, but they'll have a lot of intensity. Near the bottom, you're going to get where it's a little cooler, a little bit more humidity. It'll be a little rounder. The maturation may not be as developed, but it'll have its own unique qualities. So it's knowing the in each warehouse of anybody I work with. A good example would be with Wyoming whiskey. We don't do barrel rotations anymore, so we're able to pick out very distinct profiles from areas, rows of the warehouse, A through F, and so I'll have a good idea, where I want to harvest certain barrels from there in order to get a certain profile, and then I'll add that to the blend. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's getting to it.
Yeah, no, I think it's leading up to it.
There's a lot involved to it, and so it's part of that, and again, it's knowing the stock quite intimately too. You over time know what to look for, and I have to say that because I blend for a lot of different distilleries, my methodology might be a little different from distillery to distillery, depending on what the needs are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, I think that makes sense. So I got kind of one more question before we start diving into the Joseph Magnus stuff.
Yeah.
And since you are blending and you're doing a lot of things with different distilleries, and I think we've brought up on the show before, and you see it quite often in the beer industry, where you see collaborations of different breweries, and they'll use the yeast or use something, and coming from a blending background yourself, do you find it odd that, or interesting maybe, that distilleries don't do like limited edition blendings with, say, like, I'll take a few barrels from here, from your distillery, I'll take a few barrels from this distillery, and we'll put it together and we'll come out with a collaboration series. Now, don't get me wrong, I know this is what NDPs are for, but however, like, you don't really see like this collaboration between different distilleries.
Well, that's an excellent point. And I would like to see us do a lot more of that here in the States. The way you might do in Scotland, for example. I think, I know there's a lot of emphasis at the moment on getting, having people kind of want to taste the terroir of from a certain distillery, which is perfectly fine and can be a beautiful thing. But when you start blending, just as you said, from distillery to distillery, and have a few things kind of going on like that at the moment behind the scenes. But you can create much more interesting profiles, things people have never thought of before. And I'd really love to see more collaboration that way here in the States. I think if the distilleries would be more open to sharing, distillate and being able to blend that way, we could just really blow open the doors here. And it's something I for sure have been wanting to see for a very long time. And knock on wood, it's slowly starting to happen, but I would really like to see a lot more of that.
Well, cool. Maybe we'll talk after this, and we'll form an we'll form an LLC and kind of get our own thing going. So
you got it.
So there's also one more question about blending, and I asked this to Drew, and I kind of want to get your take on it too, because there's a lot of people that do home blending. They like to do it with aftermarket products. Perhaps they like go buy some White Dog and age it in like one of those like 1 gallon barrels, or they take the 1 ounce out of every single one of the bottles they have, and they put it in their affinity bottle. Kind of give an idea of like if home blenders should just give up because like leave it to you all to kind of just figure it out, or is there like a recipe or something like that, or maybe you should kind of like think about when you're going into a blend of like if you're going to be buying aftermarket products to try to blend stuff, like maybe this is the way you should think about it.
Well, yeah, and that's I thought about that question when I saw your interview with Drew. I've had a chance to think about it since, in all fairness. I certainly encourage people to do home blending. Heck, I have to admit, in my free time, not that I have that much anymore, but when I'm actually at home, I like to do things like that myself. That said, and I think Drew is spot on about this, in a 1 to 5 gallon barrel, even a 10 gallon, you're never going to really be able to approximate the kind of things that you can do with a standard 53 gallon whiskey barrel. And I know people, might make up blends and add a little bit of port or sherry or Sauterne or something like that in their home blends, which is great, and those kind of things can be really nice in and of themselves, but you're never going to quite approximate the same way that it would be from when you put it in a finishing cask, for example, where you have the benefit of the ingress and egress of oxygen over time, and more complex chemical reactions occurring, and it will be different in that, and so I certainly want to encourage all the home blenders. It's a fun thing to do for sure, to see what kind of aromas you can create, but it is a very different thing for sure, and I don't think it can quite approximate what we're able to do, but by all means, I
could read between your lines there. I could read between the lines. Like, leave it to the professionals. Like, we could figure this out.
Oh, that's we don't want to be put out of business, for goodness sakes.
You don't want to add a competition, right? No more competition. I'm just kidding. No, I think your reputation speaks for itself.
Yeah, well, thanks. But yeah, I want people to have fun with it. At the end of the day, that's really what it's about, is enjoying something, really.
Absolutely. So let's talk about a whiskey that I actually enjoy myself, Joseph Magnus. So I kind of wanted to let you know, first off, if you can talk about anything about the distillery, the history, and kind of what you're doing there for him as well.
Sure. So Joseph Magnus was originally a distillery started by Joseph A. Magnus in Cincinnati. I believe he opened his doors in 1892. In Cincinnati, he was a distiller, blender, and rectifier. So he was sourcing at that time, just as we are at the moment for the Magnus that we make right now. He shut his doors in 1917. So what I'm doing when I was approached, and my part of this is this old bottle had been passed down through the family. Actually, a few of them had been passed down. And the great-great-grandson, when his mother died, found these bottles in her closet, took them and took them to me and Dave Shurick, former master distiller at Woodford Reserve, and Richard Wolfe, who was the GM at Buffalo Trace. Took them to us to analyze, and so I actually got a needle and syringe and went down through the cork or the side of the bottle, and took samples out. We did a sensory analysis, the three of us, and it was phenomenal. I have to say, it was clear that it was an older whiskey. If that bottle was from 1892, and he opened in 1892. Well, he obviously didn't distill it himself, right? But a very interesting part that we found, I kept on getting this very distinct sherry kind of note. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd for a bourbon. Well, lo and behold, we found out through historical records that after Joseph Magnus sold the distillery, he was selling off sherry barrels. So we were able to confirm that sherry barrels were indeed used. So when I was trying to create recreate this profile of the original whiskey, it was really obvious to me that I would have to use sherry cask for it. The cognac cask, which we use a small percentage of, that's not historically authentic. But I felt like I needed a little bit of that profile just to replicate the original. I needed a little bit more floral fruit and nut kind of qualities from it. Some things I wasn't exactly getting from the sherry. So that's how we came up with the Joseph Magnus triple cask.
Interesting. So. And was Joseph Magnus, was the distillery a casualty of Prohibition then, I'm assuming?
Well, the Volstead Act didn't go into effect until, 1919? But I think it might have been... it
couldn't have been Prohibition, because that was way later then. Yeah.
Saw, the writing on the wall at that time. And in fact, this is Joseph right over my shoulder, right here.
Well, I think it's interesting that he was aging in sherry cask, because I kind of thought that, a lot of the different kind of the aging in different kinds of barrels was something that is more modern in the past decade rather than it was doing, 100 years ago.
Well, yeah, I agree. And I've since learned that sherry casks were not uncommon here to find in the United States. And maybe he was just using what he could find. I don't know. I've really been wanting to find out a little bit more why he chose sherry cask, but the original, and I keep it in an undisclosed location, a little bit of it in my home office.
We make sure we won't give out that address.
Thank you. I don't have the original bottles anymore. That's stayed with the family, but I do have a little bit of the original whiskey in my home lab. It's amazing. Mm-hmm.
I kind of want you to talk about reverse engineering this and kind of what your thought process was going into this and how you got to triple casking something to kind of try to recreate that original flavor.
Well, again, I know that it was quite obvious that I'll start with the sourced whiskey, okay? I know a lot of people are, always pleased with distilleries that source, but
I think it's better to have transparency than anything, right? So I think people appreciate that.
I agree, but I have to say in this case there was a historical precedent with the original distillery, and they were doing that obviously when they opened. And, they had bought some old whiskey and had it in sherry cask. So there certainly was a historical precedent for it, and being a blender and a rectifier too. That's what you do. You have to sort sometimes, but the thought process was trying to stay to keep to the integrity and taste profile of the original whiskey as much as possible, using what we have to work with today, and so that's why I chose to finish it in sherry. Again, the cognac cask part was it's not historically accurate, but if I was going to maintain the integrity of the original and stick as close as I could to the original profile, I felt like I had no choice but to use that.
I mean, I guess kind of talk about like some of the different flavor profiles that you are getting off these different kinds of cask finishes, right? Because it seems like that is your key to finding these secret blends is using all these crazy kind of barrel finishes.
So what I'm looking for, but because the whiskey that we use is now 10, 11 years old, I'm not looking. First of all, in the finishing cask, I'm not looking for new tannins necessarily. So I like to be very careful about what cask I pick. What cooperages I work with. I don't want to be introducing new tannin in there, but from the Oloroso, for example, I want some nuttiness and dry dark fruit and black currant and that sort of thing. From the PX will be a little sweeter, and I don't use a whole lot of that in the blend, but I want just a little bit more of that nutty quality. Again, dry dark fruit. Think date, fig, black currant. Dark cherry. That sort of thing. Maybe some candied orange peel as well. And from the cognac, I'm really looking for a little bit more of a. I hesitate to say grapiness, but a little bit more of a floral note, and maybe a little orchard fruit in there too, if that makes sense.
You could say whatever you want. It's gonna make sense to me because I'm not a trained. I don't train my palate that well. So yeah.
So yeah, and a little bit of the notes that you might get from. From Union Blanc, which they use in cognac. That's the varietal that's used to make cognac. We get a little bit more of the minerality, if that makes sense, from the soil and such. So that those were the kind of notes that I was looking for, because the original Magnus, that old bottle of 125-year-old whiskey was so complex. Unfortunately, it's degraded a lot after I opened it. I keep my little vial well sealed in a dark, dry location at my house. But it has started to degrade. But when we originally opened it, it was one of the most complex things I think the three of us had ever tasted. It was just absolutely phenomenal.
Well, awesome. So there's another one that you guys are also pushing out there. Actually, you guys have a few different labels. So you got the single barrels from Joseph A. Magnus as well. And then those are just straight sourced, just single barrels, right? Nothing too crazy finishing or anything like that.
For which one again?
The Joseph Magnus single barrels.
Oh,
like the private programs, right?
That's correct. Yeah. There's nothing crazy about it.
Yeah,
maybe it's crazy, but that's
yeah, right. No, I'm with you. And then there's Murray Hill as well. Can you talk about that one a little bit?
Sure. So Murray Hill Club was it was an original Joseph Magnus brand from the turn of the century. Unfortunately, with that one, I did not have an original bottle to go with. So all I had were these turn of the century advertisements that said things like Murray Hill Club is preferred by 9 out of 10 gentlemen, or it helps with what there was some kind of wild saying about if marriage is the fatal termination of a disease called love, then Murray Hill is the cure for that. It's really, obscure, very nebulous kind of
macho, whatever. Yeah.
And so I really had no idea how to make, how am I going to blend something based on what these advertisements say. So with that, I kind of took a chance, and I have to say, not that I'm John Glazer by any stretch, but I'm a big John Glazer fan of Compass Box whiskey. I don't know if you've ever had that.
I've heard of Compass Box. I haven't had it, but I've heard of it.
It's a brilliant blender. He's one of my blending heroes, and I wanted to kind of do something in that spirit. Again, not that I'm him, but his style of blending was certainly an inspiration. So, and I know he does blended whiskeys. So I thought, well, why not revive a historical category of blended bourbon? So I thought, well, maybe taking a chance with that, but I thought, well, let's make Murray Hill into a blended bourbon. And so with that, in order to kind of approximate what I think this old whiskey might have tasted like, I use a very small percentage of a 9-year-old light whiskey. The majority of the blend will be 11 and 12-year-old bourbon, with some 18-year-old added, the nuance component to it. So it's intended to be have some complexity, but it's also intended to be somewhat light or round on the palate, or I certainly hope it is, and
right.
Just an enjoyable dram.
So this is, I'm glad you kind of put that out there, because it was actually a question that came from on Facebook. It was from Jason Fritz, and he's kind of curious. Is like, so there's light whiskey in Murray Hill. How can it be labeled a bourbon then? I don't know if this is a TTB question, but he was just kind of curious.
It is. Yeah. There is a category called blended bourbon, or also known as bourbon, a blend. And I think you have to have 51% straight bourbon by the proof gallon or something like that. I forget the exact specification, but we're, way down. The amount of light whiskey that we use, maybe it's 1 barrel to 5, much older bourbons.
Gotcha. So, see, that's all you had to do.
It's
myth busted.
A little bit to kind of make it a different thing from bourbon.
Right.
Yeah, but it's its own thing. It's not exactly like bourbon, but it has a lot of those qualities. And I think also, being I'm because I have more of a kind of a European spirits background. and those type of spirits tend to be much shyer on oak than, say, bourbon and other American whiskeys. I also wanted that component from the light whiskey to not, be quite as oak forward and be a little shyer on that aspect. If that
Absolutely.
makes sense.
And then you've got another product called the cigar blend that is one of your babies as well. So I kind of want you to.
That's my child.
So kind of talk about like what goes into the cigar blend and what makes this, I guess you could say the motivation to make it as well and everything like that.
Yeah, sure. So I was actually I live in Berkeley, California, and I was a rare time that I was at home. I was under on my deck under the redwoods one evening on a nice warm evening, smoking my pipe, and I was having trying the Joseph Magnus triple cask, a number of my other bourbon go-tos, and then I ventured over to Armagnac, and for whatever reason, nothing was really hitting my palate the right way that evening. So I thought, well, I like to have an occasional cigar or smoke a pipe occasionally, and wouldn't it be nice to, I like cognacs that have been, the cigar blend cognacs and such, and I'm an Armagnac fan. Wouldn't it be great to make something like that with bourbon? And so that was the genesis of it. And then I started putting together some prototypes and see how this would really work out. And the way it kind of ended up is I use about roughly 20 to 25% of the Joseph Magnus triple cask in there. The majority of the blend will be, I wanted a little bit more rye in the blend, so I use, with about a 36% rye bourbon, MGP, of course, and then some 18-year-old, and I add more 18-year-old to this one, and and some of the Armagnac components too. I think from the barrels, some of the Armagnacs were pretty old too, and they're in the woods. So I think all the components to that are the way it's married. It just has a much older, mature feeling to it than. I have to say it's my favorite.
It is. It's delicious. That's what I said. I've got a few bottles myself, so I think it's really good. I don't get to pair it with cigars too often, but I'm not much of a cigar person. But the first time I had it, I was like, I don't think you need a cigar with this. I think it's still fantastic the way it is, right?
Oh, thanks. It's always a work in progress, and in fact, today I've been making. Adjustments to the next blend. I'll occasionally, when I'm back here in DC, I'll taste it, and if I think it needs a little bit more sweetness to it, or a little bit more depth or length on the palate, or finesse, I'm always kind of tinkering with this one to try and really get it going in the direction that I want it to go.
That's great. So I got kind of like one, and maybe it might lead into another question for you to kind of finish this off. So, you guys are doing a lot with finished casks, finished stuff, whether it's in Armagnac or whether it's in cognac, whatever it is. Do you kind of see barrel finishes as the future of the industry?
I don't know if it is the future. I think it is certainly a future. I think as a blender, it's a really exciting area to go into. I know, I maybe for if you're talking about using it with bourbon, I know a lot of bourbon fans don't really care for that, and that's I guess diehard bourbon lovers, and that's perfectly fine too. I do think, for me, what it really adds is excitement, and anytime I can, have a place to play and be creative and create new flavors. To me, the idea of Armagnac and bourbon coming together is really exciting. I love both. I'm a big fan of both, and I like the taste of both together. It creates something very different than just Armagnac or just bourbon, or just bourbon and cognac or whatever. And so yeah, I've it's a matter of fact, this week here I'm working on some new. I've got some new tricks up my sleeve with some new cask finishes. I don't think anyone's done yet. I think that's a really exciting area. I think, of course, people that work with heirloom corn varietals, like my dear friends and clients at Iron Root Republic, that's an exciting place for whiskey to go. There are a lot of interesting things going on right now. I think it's at the end of the day, as long as you can experiment, which is good, but you have to always be able to maintain quality. That just if you experiment but you can't keep that up, then that's kind of where I draw the line. I mean, it has to be good.
Absolutely. So you kind of see a lot of the barrel finishes, the types of, as you said, heirloom grains, like whether it's types of corn, whatever is. I mean, of course, I think for you, it keeps it exciting. I think there's, as you said already, there's a different, I might even fall on this other side where it's just kind of like, I love just a good, pure bourbon. Right. And that's what I would say 90% of the bourbons that I have are not kind of, finished sort of stuff. However, every once in a while it is kind of good to throw it in there. And I'll be honest, like, when I had this cigar blend, like I don't get a whole lot. It's not like drinking an Angel's Envy where you're like, yeah, you can definitely tell this is finished in like a port cask, right? But like versus something like the cigar blend that still has a lot of that bourbon flavor into it, where you're not taking on a whole lot of, wine characteristics or anything like that, right?
No, but then again, the Armagnac, is probably aromatically, I mean, and in some ways is a lot closer to the bourbon anyway. So, and you're getting, stewed prune and tobacco and, the leather, those kind of things, maybe dried apricot or whatever. And it seems to be a lot closer, and it really goes very well. With that, I have to say, with the sherry cask finish, I as much as I love it, I'm not always in the mood for it as a connoisseur. I love it, but sometimes I don't want that taste necessarily. So I think there's room for all these things, and they're exciting new products, and it kind of depends on where your palate's at the moment.
I'm totally with you. So, Nancy, I want to say thank you again for joining the show today. It was very, very entertaining and very, I guess you could say, educational too while we went through it, right?
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we finally made this happen.
I know, right?
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I want you to be able to give a kind of plug for any way that anybody can get in contact with you. If you have a website or anything like that people can learn more about you or anything like that.
Well, I have to say I'm a little embarrassed to admit I don't have a website.
Well, let me guess. You don't have a Twitter handle either then?
The what's that?
You don't have a Twitter handle either then? Is that what I'm guessing?
I'm so technological. It's shameful, really. But
it's okay. I had to go, I think, through like LinkedIn and like 9 other people to get a hold of you.
About me in the Atlantic or.
Yes. So you can find her. You can find her all those different places, and of course, we named all the different brands that Nancy has been working with throughout the show. So Wyoming whiskey, Joseph Magnus. So you can go and you can go out there and you can go put her.
Henry and Sons.
Yeah. So you can go out there. You can go out there and you can taste them and you can put it to the test yourself. So Nancy, once again, thank you for joining on the show. Now,
Nancy might not have a Twitter handle, but we do, as well as Instagram and Facebook at Bourbon Pursuit. Go ahead and follow us there. If you like what you hear, make sure you support the show on Patreon. You can join us at $3, $5, or $10 a month. We've got t-shirts, giveaways, koozies, all kinds of cool stuff. So go there, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. If you have any other show suggestions, people you'd like to see, if you'd like to help sponsor the show in 2018, make sure you send us a message. It's the duo, THEDUO at bourbonpursuit.com. Once again, Nancy, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you all. Yeah, we'll see you all next week.